Runuku rurangi, ruai ruai. Ruku hia ki wai kare ao, pue ake, i o tamataha. Moinga kura, o te moinga rau o te mano. E pare te tai ki taumata kahawai. Pare rā te awa nui. Ki waimapu. Whakatupu i te kai, whakatupu i te tangata. Ko te pauwhuna, ko te paumoana. E mauri, o mātou hapu. O mai tamaraoho. O Ngāti Tapu. Anō hoki, mo mātou iwi. O Ngāti Rangi Nui. E ngunguru nei te awi te pō au e hā. Mai te toki haumi e hui e tāia ki e. A tēnā ka mihi ki a koutou te kaunihira. Ko hui hui ai i tēnei pō. Hei whakawhiti whakaaro. Te hua pai. Hei manaaki. I ngā uri. E noho nei ki rungi te whenua o Tauranga moana. My honour and privilege to be here today to represent a very dear part of my whakapapa, ngai tamarawaho, of Huri. And especially to talk about the consideration that we have before us about the reclassification, is it? Of what used to be the bowls and the proposal to develop a cultural centre for Tauranga. How amazing that is to hear, for me to say that. I don't actually grow up in Tauranga. I grew up in Auckland. Most of my hapa had to leave Tauranga because we had no land. Didn't have land here to sustain us. As you know, was taken. I was born and raised in a whenua that was not mine, that I had no connection to. My saving grace was my father brought me home every Christmas for the first 13 years of my life. So I understood where I was from. I understood that this is where the bones and the blood of my ancestors. I understood connection I have to Tauranga moana, Tauranga to this land. There's nothing we can do to change the injustices of the past. But I'm glad we've come to the maturity where we can understand it and look to provide a way forward that accepts and respects both cultures, it nurtures and develops both. I understand some of the objections. And of course, we've heard it for the last 180 years. We're grateful that those objections are getting smaller and quieter as the dinosaurs die. Because their grandchildren know how to waiata. They know how to paka. They're learning how to speak our reo. was an aspiration offered at the signing of the treaty. He iwi kotahi tata. We continue to hold to that aspiration. And I think for Tauranga, I can't understate the importance of having a cultural centre. Something that unites us. Where both sides are respected. The true history is remembered. I've gone past the point of thinking that there is shame. There's no shame in what happened. It happened. You can't change what happened. The only thing we can affect is today and the future. So I speak about the opportunity we have to establish a brighter future for our kids, for our grandchildren, and for those that will follow them. I'll be proud to say that I'm from Tauranga. And they will say Tauranga, not Tauranga. We all understand it was a significant shift in the country this year with the celebration of Matariki. Some of you will know that the schools here have been celebrating it for over a decade. The primary schools have been celebrating it over a decade. To finally have it recognised signals a significant shift. I hope that this council, councillors, will supporting what has been tabled. I believe we desperately need a cultural centre. I was there when we commemorated Whakango of Wikahinina. Some of you may have been, and if you were, then you will know how significant an event it was. And how proud I am that there are poets representing my ancestors that lined the street of Cameron Road. My great-great-granduncle was the first person killed. His name was Ehakara. I had another great-grandfather. It was in what they call the small readout. He was only a teenager. I grew up with these stories. And it would be such an honour if I'm there to see the realisation of this dream. O reira kochi, o kenei kōrero, I whāraki nei, kei mua I a tatau, hei tā koho, mō koutou. E te mihi mai hoki o koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tatau.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Really appreciate you coming and sharing that with us today. Do you have any questions? No, I think you said it all. But thank you. Really appreciate it.
Right. Do I push this off now?
Okay, so moving on then with the business before us, we have no late items. We have no confidential business transferred into the open. Not aware of any change to the order of business. That brings us to the minutes, and we've got several sets of minutes from the 2nd of November 1st. So I think I was here, but I zoomed in. Bill, thank you. And Shad seconded. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. 7th of November, true and correct record. Shad, Bill second. No discussion on that? No. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. And then the 14th of November. Bill and Shad, thank you. Nothing to raise. All those in favour say aye. Against carried. Thank you very much. That brings us to item 11, which is the partial reclassification of the Gate Pa Reserve and deliberations on that. And we've got Rachel by the looks of it, and Phil. Morena.
Kia ora tātou, ko Phil Kaifong Tukungoa, ko Rachel Williams tēnei, Morena. In the absence of Curtis Bones, I'm here to introduce the deliberations report that Rachel's prepared for the partial reclassification of the Gate Pa Recreation Reserve to facilitate a proposal from Ngāi Tamarawaho and the Pukehinahina Charitable Trust to establish the cultural and historic centre on part of the reserve. And the report is now asking for a decision on the partial reclassification. The deliberations report follows on from consultation that was undertaken between the 12th of September and the 12th of October this year, and a public hearing on the matter of 7 November, notwithstanding that none of the submitters spoke to their submissions at that hearing. Following on from the public hearing, there have been 2 submissions received from residents of St George Street, which runs alongside the Gate Pa Reserve. We'd like to ask that the council receives the late submissions for their consideration. If we can otherwise take the report as read, I'll just ask Rachel if she can add to the introductory comments. We're otherwise happy to take any questions or discussions on the report. And if I can just acknowledge the comments also this morning from Kalani Tarawa on the opportunity to establish a brighter future for our children and grandchildren. Thank you.
Morena, Madam Chair. Following on from the meeting on the 7th of November, as it was mentioned in that meeting, I followed up further with the Gate Pa Tennis Club. So I spoke with Mike Callard, who is the president there, and he raised no concerns about how the project was progressing. I also spoke with one of the owners of 7 St George Street. So she raised some concerns around the car parking for the cultural centre and for the reserve. So after that conversation with her, we received the 2 late submissions from the St George Street residents. So there are only 2 properties on St George Street. So we responded to those submissions and just confirmed no decisions have been made around the car parking. The idea is if the cultural centre goes ahead, council will work with affected parties to identify the best location for it. And I also reiterated with Mike as well that the tennis club will be taken care of in terms of that car park. It won't just be for the cultural centre. Following the confirmation of this report, a copy was sent to the tennis club, the residents of St George Street, Heritage Bay of Plenty, Pukehinahina Charitable Trust, Ngāi Tamarawaho, Tourism Bay of Plenty.
Thanks very much. So questions? Shad.
Thank you. I'm happy to move the report as well, but I've got a couple of comments and a question.
So you're happy to move and including receiving the late submissions? Yep. And your second? Okay, thank you.
I think firstly, just thank you guys for the work that you've done in terms of the report, but also the engagement that's taken place over the last couple of months in terms of the proposal that's before the Commission today. I do want to acknowledge, I think firstly, that this is one of those outstanding matters in terms of the relationship between Council and Ngāi Tamarawaho in particular that seeks to resolve an agreement or action and agreement that was put in place in the late 1990s, early 2000s in regards to Route K. And so great for us to get to a point of getting to a resolution in that regard. So, the agreements that council have made previously, there's an expectation that the organisation will honour those agreements, and I think coming today recognises that we are honouring that arrangement and that agreement to find a solution for a cultural centre that was put forward by Ngāi Tamarāwaho during that period. And in my view, it makes sense to locate it in this location, given the significance of Pukahinahina, not just to Ngāi Tamarāwaho, but to Tauranga Moana, to all the iwi and hapu of Tauranga Moana, and also to all those tribes that heeded the call to come and support the tribes here against the threat of invasion. So the site is of not just local significance and not just regional significance, but actually of national significance. And I've made the comment before, it's the only land wall site that's actually in an urban environment. When I think about Rangiriri, which is on your way to Auckland, restoration of that past site with Wakakotahi over the last few years is amazing. But I think we have an opportunity here, and the relationship that we have with the Pukahinahina Trust and also Ngāi Tamarāwaho lends itself towards potentially a cultural centre on this particular site that references our history, tells our stories, and our relationship. And I do want to acknowledge Kalani's comments about, regardless of the way we feel about our history, the good and the bad and the ugly, it's our history, and we need to acknowledge it. I also pick up on the points raised by submitters that, particularly the concerns about car parking, and understand that we still need to go through a process of consenting, understanding traffic management, all those kinds of things still need to be worked through, and a commitment by us to work through those issues and those matters with the local residents. And then, I suppose just lastly, it is important, I think, for us to be able to tell our stories. Listening to Kalani talk about his ancestors, I had 3 ancestors two in particular that fought at Gate Pa and survived and managed to raise families. And I'm a descendant of those 2. And then also an ancestor that fought at Tauranga, but he wasn't so lucky. And just want to acknowledge all of those that fought during those battles, both Māori and non-Māori, those that lost their lives, and acknowledging the connection back to Otamata as well, and the cemetery and those that lie there. And my question is really around the reserves management plan and the timing and process for amendments to those. And then also the lease arrangement potentially with the Pukahinahina Trust. In terms of timeframes, what will that look like?
Thank you, Chad. In terms of timing, the next step will be to discuss the lease provisions with the Trust, and that will involve the Spaces and Places team as well, so we can make sure we understand the impact it has on the reserve management plan, because this lease isn't anticipated. From what I understand, that process requires public consultation as well, so we'll look to tie that in at the same time as we go out to the public with the terms of the lease. I anticipate it would be early New Year. Depending on the outcome of today's meeting, we will commence discussions with PCT and Ngāi Tamarāwaho, Spaces and Places, and the other parties we need to involve in the lease process. So yeah, hopefully in the early new year we'll be back at council for them to consider the lease.
Just 2 other comments. So While this site is significant to Ngāi Tamarāwa who have mana in this particular area, it's actually of significance to all of Tauranga Moana. So I just want to make sure that through that process that we're also engaging widely around the proposition through the Pukahinahina Trust. And just the last comment is noting concerns by some of the submitters about the cost. The potential cost to ratepayers. At the moment, we don't have a proposal before us, and that still needs to follow through another process. So, being led by Pukahinahina Trust along with Ngāi Tamarāwa, and when we get to that point, if there is a request for additional funding, ideally, Crown funding would be the ideal scenario, given its national significance, but would need to follow a conversation with the community if there was a request made.
So the Chief Executive just suggested that perhaps we include in the resolution today that you commence that consultation as part of the negotiations of the lease and the reserves management plan changes, so that you don't have to come back to council. You can just get on with that. With the mover and seconder happy to. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That makes sense.
So maybe a D is to commence. Commence consultation regarding with Pukahinahina Trust regarding the lease and the reserves management and with spaces and places over the reserve management plan changes, and consult with the public accordingly. Something like that. And then that just gets you on with it, because we know it's going to happen. All right? So mover and seconder happy to include that. Bill, did you finish? Was that Bill? Did you have any questions?
Very briefly, Chair, I think, and Shad, I think, said it all, and certainly support the comments he has made. I just wanted to add a brief comment in terms of seeing this as really the opportunity going forward in terms of telling, and it's been touched on, telling the stories. And I think it's one thing in this city, history, it's either not told or it's not evident. As you live here, you move around, etc., etc. So I think the opportunity that this proposition through the reclassification and then ultimately the development of a cultural and history centre will hopefully fill some of that gap for all of the residents in the city, but also those that come here and visit. So that's the only thing I want to say on that, and also support that engagement with the residents who have submitted those late submissions.
Thank you. I guess it's interesting when you look at the comments from submitters that one of the submitters didn't even know that Gate Pa was a victory for Māori. So that's why we have to understand and tell our history, and whether it's good or bad or ugly, you can't change it. So, but you do need to understand. And that often drives a lot of behaviours. I guess the only question I have is just to clarify. So the Pukahinahina Trust would be the vehicle for the lease of the land, and they need that before they can get funding for designs and talk about how the centre would be funded. Can you just remind us who the Pukahinahina Trust are?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a list of the trustees, but they're made up of members of Ngāi Tamarawaho. There's a number of historians that are also part of it, and other tangata whenua members as well. I do know that there is I think it's Captain Cliff Simmons is also on the board, and one of their main drivers is to educate Tauranga, Moana and New Zealand about the history of Tauranga. And this is one way that they see to do it. So they do need certainty in terms of the use of the land before they can progress and spend much more money on it. So that is the next step. And from the discussions we've had, council will lease to Pukahinahina Charitable Trust. And Ngāi Tamarawaho will be working in with them, but the arrangement will be with the trust.
So the important thing is that this is a community trust that is made up of both Māori and Pākehā, actually, Māori and local Pākehā. So some of the submitters think that this is just entirely an initiative from Māori, but it isn't. This is from our community working together. All right, nothing further. So with the addition of E, which allows us staff to get on negotiating the lease, changing the reserves management plan, and then the consultation that's required as a part of that with the public, which we've added into the resolution. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. That is a significant step. Thank you. Thanks for the work. Oh, I'm sorry, just with next steps, once all that's done, just some of the concerns that were raised around car parking and traffic management, all of that will be part of a resource consent that will be needed to build on that site. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I anticipate that the car parking will also be looked at through the lease side of things. So when we publicly consult on the lease, it'll be captured in there as well as the resource consent process.
Okay, great, thank you, thank you. Okay, so in my eagerness to get to that, I missed a couple of things off the agenda. Declaration of conflicts of interest, none. And we have a petitioner. He's on his way. He's on his way, okay, that's fine. He was a bit worried about traffic. So that then brings us to 11.2, the Civil Defence Emergency Management Controller endorsement. Barbara was ready to speak to it.
Don't need to by the sounds of things. Do you want me to speak to it? Or?
No, I think Bill's moving it and Shad is seconding it. Makes sense to nominate Sarah Ominston. Is that how you pronounce it? Ominston?
I just note that we need to delete C. We don't need that in the resolution. So it's just A and B endorsing that we take it forward. Thank you.
All right, any discussion? No? All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Temporary road closures.
Yeah, so this is about two events, Bay Dreams and Juicy Festival, that are coming up over the holiday period. And we hadn't finalised the details when we took the rest of the road closures to you back in August. So the operational aspects of this are now finalised. We've done the advertisement on the 28th of October, consultation period finished on the 18th of November. No feedback received. And these are also repeat events. For which historically there's been some issues, but have been sort of ironed out over the last few years. And there wasn't, these events weren't on last year because of COVID, but the last couple that have taken place have functioned fine from our perspective.
Thanks, Nick. Can you just be keen for you to outline how the proposed road closure of Truman Lane related to the Bay Park interchange? Because I noticed the other day that there's a proposition to close one of the lanes for some months while those works are undertaken. So I was just getting a bit more of an understanding of that together with this proposed road closure.
Yeah, so we will maintain access to Tauranga. So there'll be access available through the site.
I think what's concerning us is that Waka Kotahi has been advertising that they're going to close one lane of Truman Lane for a considerable period of time, and then we're going to close it altogether. So I think the concern is, Waka Kotahi road closures seem to last a lot longer than they promise, is the first, especially over the holiday period. And then secondly, how do you get access to 29A? Because currently you have to take Truman Lane to get access. So will these road closures close Truman Lane completely for this time, given that there's already one lane closed by Waka Kotahi? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. I would have to come back to you on the detail of that, but I know that the team has been working with Waka Kotahi to maintain the service, and that's actually part of why this has taken a while, but in order to maintain the service for the state highway traffic and the Truman Lane traffic. So I would have to, I mean, I can provide some details, some plans of how the flows will work and when the more exact timing around the closures.
That would be helpful, and yeah, I think that would be helpful. Thank you. But Shad?
I think too, just making sure the public's aware. So, well, about the timing of all of that. Waka Kotahi are doing their works and diverting people through Truman Lane, that the general public also are aware of these events coming up and what that might look like.
Yeah, point taken. Thank you.
Okay, you're moving and seconding. Thank you. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Backflow prevention device installation cost recovery.
Yeah, it's an exciting title, isn't it? We've got Peter Bass and Jack Finish here, who've provided the work for this and some options as well. So I'll hand over to Peter to give you the context.
Morena. So backflow is a pretty technical thing, but it's one of those things that we have to implement, backflow prevention, to keep the community safe. Out of interest, Tauranga City has always been seen as one of the leaders in this space, but certain things have changed with recent legislative changes. So currently, most of our connections are protected with some form of backflow prevention device, but we change that backflow device depending on the risk of the property which it's connected to. So a high-risk industry that manufactures chemicals, for example, or a mortuary, the likes of those type of things would be deemed a high risk, and therefore you'd have a high-risk prevention device, which we call an RPZ in the document. For a medium risk, for example, like a swimming pool, we would have what's called a testable double-check device. Every household which is deemed as low risk would have what's called a non-testable dual-check device. So it provides protection, but it depends on the risk. So what's changed is with the Water Services Act coming into place, they've introduced some drinking water quality assurance rules, and some of those have made changes to the way in which we deal with backflow. One of them being that we have to conduct surveys of the whole city on a 5-year basis and undertake and check that the backflow device that's been installed is representative of the risk associated with that property. So historically, we have done surveys, but we haven't done them as regularly as the new regulations require us to do. And as a result of these, so we now have to comply effectively with this regulation. It was introduced, took effect in 14 November this year, so just a week ago, and we've got to comply by the 1st of January. So we're busy rolling out a program, and the implication of this is more about when we find a property that needs a backflow device upgraded, how are we going to recover that cost? Historically, we've relied on we notify the property owner, and they would then get a contractor, their preferred contractor, and get the device installed, and they would then pick up the cost on that basis. So it was always a user pays type of arrangement. The reason we bought this paper is we've proposed 3 options, one of them being the option that we've run with historically, which is option 2. But we've proposed option 1 as our preferred option, which is where we undertake that using our maintenance contractor, and then billing the property owner as a result of the installation. The rationale behind it is that we feel that with the regulations tightening up, there'll be scrutiny on the time frame between establishing that a backflow device needs updating and the installation time. Historically, when we've allowed the customer to take that role, sometimes the process becomes quite protracted, and there's quite a long delay between the device being recognized at risk and the customer actually implementing the change. So that's the primary reason why we've brought the paper through, to recognize that we're suggesting a change in the way in which we recover those costs. So in essence, that's so option 1 is really that TCC takes control of the installation, gives a quote to the customer, and then bills them once the install has been done. The second option remains the status quo effectively, where the customer gets their own contractor to install it and picks up the cost. And then option 3 is the one where we choose to subsidize it and pay for it from a TCC point of view.
Thank you. So the other thing to clarify is that on the current option, after the installation, that piece of equipment is then vested in council.
Correct.
So we would then take responsibility for it.
Correct.
Yeah. So is that part of why? Is that a change, or is that's the way it always was?
That's always been the case. So the device is effectively ours to maintain, depreciate, and renew.
Okay. So this is all part of the water reforms, and the first part of that was setting up Taumata Arawhai and starting to lift the standards. And so this is what the government's been talking about, lifting the standards of required for, and the costs associated, then falling both on council and on private individuals for providing safe drinking water, and we're going to start seeing the standards lifted for the disposal of stormwater and wastewater as a consequence too. Okay. Any questions? Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. So am I clear that in your earlier presentation, you're saying we'd have to do it then the monitoring then every 5 years after this initial one?
So the way we'd see it working is that we'd break the city up into 5-year components, and we'd structure it that we do a certain number of properties each year. So roughly speaking, we've got 50-odd thousand properties. There are a lot of properties that we'd be able to do on a desktop basis, but there's an expectation that we would undertake a survey of each property over a 5-year cycle.
And in terms of your paragraph 12, you talk about the low risk, the medium risk and high risk in terms of the dual check valve, the testable and the reduced pressure zone device. I take it those devices, or the 3 of them, are already in place.
Correct.
In terms of the city. Okay.
Correct. It's so what the survey would pick up is, in the event that there's a property that has a higher risk than the device that's attached to their boundary, and therefore we'd need a process of upgrading it effectively.
Okay. And just a final. No, it's covered in consultation engagement. That's fine. Thanks, Chair.
So what's involved in a physical check? So you come to my house, I've got a swimming pool. What are you going to do?
So the surveys generally will be on site in person. So you turn up to a business and you'll be checking both what is the activity and then what are the devices and equipment being used on site and what. So there's a pretty clear definition on what device creates what risk. And generally the survey will be done by someone who's appropriately trained in backflow. It's basically a subset of plumbing. So it'll be essentially a trained plumber. So they'll go on site with the ratepayer or the customer and tenant and run through their property and their activities from top to bottom, see how they're using our water, see how they're interacting with it. And then from there, will be able to give us a risk definition, I guess, on what they're doing on site. And then we can check that against what device do they have, thereby giving us either a need to install a new device or an okay that we can just roll on through to the next property.
Do you have to check the actual device? I mean, do you have to dig a hole? I assume it's connected.
These devices are above
ground
or in a box in the ground, so it's pretty simple, just similar to a meter, right?
Right,
So,
okay.
yeah, it's the higher level devices are above ground in the cage, so you can literally see them from the road, and the rest you just need to pop a box and take a look.
All right, yep, Shad.
Thank you. So just in terms of and I see in the report the cost, ranges from $1,000 through to $10,000. So if you've identified one of these meters that requires upgrading, do you give them, say a business or a property owner having to pay for the device, which is fine, but do we give them sufficient time to understand what the impacts or what the implications are going to be on them? So rather than just turning up and saying, this device is no longer fit for purpose and you need a new one, and now it's going to cost you $10,000. I'm just wanting to understand, the process for engaging with those landowners.
Absolutely.
Rather than just sending them a bill for $10,000 that you've already installed. And
No, absolutely. Yeah, go.
But I guess the key here is working with the owner. The challenge is how the payment gets made. So $10,000 is quite a lot, but that would be pretty extreme case where you've got hard surfaces. It's in a busy road where you need significant traffic management, and therefore the cost adds up pretty quickly. So we sort of gave that range. We hope that there's not too many of those where our discussion with our financial colleagues is that we should be invoicing as one invoice and collecting accordingly. I know historically we have made payment arrangements, but we don't want to get into that administrative challenge that comes with that. But I'm sure there's opportunity if by exception with high invoices, maybe something could be considered. But I'd hate to put my financial colleagues on the spot with that one.
Are we working with swimming pool, and I guess it would be spa pool suppliers as well? Because we're going to put, well, are we working with them?
So one of the things that we have done is we've made this historically. We've given indication of what's required from a swimming pool connection. There's been different degrees of uptake because there's a competitive advantage if they exclude the backflow prevention device in their quotation. But I think with time, people understand that it's required. We often do pick these things up at when the property gets sold. That's part of the limb that comes through. Therefore, we find upgrades happening at that time as well. So I think there's a general greater awareness. What we are planning to do with the change in regulation is make that more visible to industry, and that's part of that engagement process. So pool companies would be part of that engagement as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Look, we already have a number of staff that go out and visit those properties with swimming pools on a cyclical basis. So I think there's an opportunity to work closely with them. Otherwise, you could have two council staff visiting the same property within the spaces of months for sort of similar type activity, and two separate bills being charged to the homeowner. And we obviously have a comprehensive list of swimming pools throughout the city. So I think there's an opportunity logistically to work with that regulatory team.
Thanks, Marty. Yes, one of the things that we've recognised is it's quite an easy desktop study. Our colleagues that do the pool fencing surveys, we hook up with them. Equally, aerial, there's visual ability to look at that aerially on our mapping system, and we've got comprehensive asset data in terms of what is and isn't connected. So, there's a lot of stuff that we can do without actually physically visiting the property.
Well, I think the issue I'm trying to make is that we should coordinate.
Correct.
Yeah.
We'll do so.
Bill's moving, Shad seconding. I had a good discussion on that. Anything further? All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much. Letters of expectation to CCOs for 23 to 24. Kia ora.
In this year's letters of expectation to our council-controlled organisations, we've linked to our strategic direction and the pillars of our city vision. The letters encourage accountability and transparency, increased diversity and accountability, efficient use of public funds, and tangata whenua partnerships. We've also noted the work underway to identify opportunities for operational efficiencies through shared service delivery models. Happy to take the report as read and welcome any feedback.
Any questions on that? Yeah, Bill.
Comment, Chair, and I understand in terms of the focus, in terms of outcomes rather than outputs or tasks. What I really wanted to ensure, though, in terms of Para 16, though, that the council expectation of CCOs to seek opportunities to utilise the logo and branding is not forgotten about, given the expectations focus at a higher level outcome approach. Thanks, Chair.
Thought you were going to say that. Yes, look, I think we've settled on settled on a good rounded letter of expectations. We've got some particulars, but we've got some aspirations or some linkage, as you say, to the values that the city is working towards. So I don't think there's any further questions. No. Happy to move, Bill. Shad second. All those in favour say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much. Have we got our petitioner arrived yet? Oh, okay. Perfect timing. Perfect timing. So his name is Mark Kimber. Mr. Kimber, welcome. Come on up. Come on up. Thank you. Now, you just need to make sure you've got the green light on your microphone. Okay, and just be aware we are public, so we are taping this, and it is available on YouTube. And you've got about 5 minutes, and we might have some questions for us. But you can sit down. You don't have to. You don't have to stand. Thank you. Right. Thank you.
This is about the pedestrian crossing that's north of the roundabout at Bethlehem, the first one you come to, between Miffitt's Road and State Highway 1, 2, sorry. It's either to get rid of it or do something with it to make it safer, you know. What I've got here is this is a video taken. You can't get it, hard to see it, but this is timing how long it takes to walk across the crossing and what happens in this one. When I was videoing this, I walked across the second side, the second part, and a car went straight through the red light in front of me, just about wiped me out while I was videoing it. So that's what this video shows. There's inadequate time to get across. There's no lighting, you know? But what I've got here is some
ran the red light.
Yeah. Oh. Yep. So it just shows how easy it happens. You know, what I've got here is some letters that, as people signed the petition, towards the end, I started thinking, well, why not ask them what they think could happen? You know, what's the better ideas? And this is from Lonnie Nichols. And my name is Lonnie Nichols. I live in Lund Road, Katikati. I use State Highway 2 on a daily basis, and due to the high number of cars and trucks, it is increasingly becoming more dangerous to drive. A number of times I've seen in very, very near misses on the pedestrian crossing at the corner of Moffat Road and Tamatia Arakanui Drive. I would like to see an overpass walkway above the road before someone else is killed. It is very hard to see the people on the pedestrian crossing, and the drivers are in such a hurry. 3 comments. I've been a local of Bethlehem to Puna for the last 15 years. I feel the intersection of Bethlehem has been simply more dangerous since the crossing has been installed. I personally had a few occasions when pedestrians have caught me off guard. As I am driving through the roundabout, my first thought after exiting is not a sudden light change or a pedestrian rapidly appearing from behind a very high fence at the crossing. Please don't hesitate to contact me if this is unclear. Lady that works in Bethlehem, I might not be able to get this right, Julia Piccoli. I'm the manager of Merchants Liquor Bethlehem, located on State Highway 2, Tauranga. I've been working in the location for about a year, but I'm very familiar with the areas. I previously worked within the town centre for 3 years. I was working when the unfortunate happening that cost the life of 2 people occurred. When I realised what happened, I was surprised. I wasn't surprised. I was hoping for a better outcome, but surely I thought it was just a matter of time before something major happened. I've witnessed several people crossing the road on a pedestrian crossing without waiting for the light to come green, as well as people prefer to walk just a bit up the road closer to my shop, especially when dark. I believe the darkness of the corner makes people feel very safe. People feel less safe. Despite the traffic light, I have also witnessed people pushing the button and then crossing without waiting for the green. I have seen the last one on many different locations too. I believe that the proximity of the roundabout doesn't allow drivers travelling through the city enough time to see this and stop at the red light, no matter what speed. The roundabout itself cuts a bit of view. When engaging it, the focus is to give way to the cars on your right. You must pay attention to who is coming on your left when on the roundabout proceeding on State Highway 2, direction of Auckland. You exit the roundabout and you are looking right straight in front of you, not on the sides, neither up in the air. So the actually reaction time to see the traffic lights is very, very short. The person between crossing with lights, okay, she carries on. But she's from Italy, and she's carries on to compare New Zealand drivers to lack of education and how they're 18 over there to get their licenses. Carlene Scollum, I believe that the crossing is creating a risk to cars, the inability traffic to flow through the traffic roundabout. This is making cars travel through the area in a risky way. Crossing is a risk to the people using it. The traffic is always heavy through this area, and people are using the road to congregate to work and back. Deja Cook, I've witnessed multiple times cars almost hitting pedestrians at this crossing. I've also witnessed pedestrians stepping out onto the crossing when they've not had the green lights to cross. They seem to glimpse down the road quickly into the oncoming cars, then run across the road if they think they have time. Because the traffic light crossing sits about 50 metres from a busy roundabout, the traffic turning onto the highway too can almost be impossible to see it coming. Also, this crossing is on a double lane stretch of road. A few times I've seen cars suddenly swerve from left to right lanes, trying to avoid a rear-end collision, not having noticed the red light at the crossing. My suggestion would be to remove the 2 pedestrian crossings along that stretch of road, and instead of put a pedestrian overpass there, there is no potential for any accidents to occur. Paul Sayer, much the same, goes on to say that he rode a car off on another pedestrian crossing at Bayfair that they put in, where it's the same sort of pedestrian crossing where it's just the traffic lights, not a marked, you used to get the walls and the zebra crossings. Well, this isn't. It's an unmarked. It's not marked on the roads. There's no warning signs. There's no nothing as you approach. So he just goes on to say that he rode off his car over the Bayfair one. That's much the same. I put a thing on the Bethlehem page. They got a Facebook page for Bethlehem community, and unfortunately, I'd screenshotted the comments because the comments were beautiful. There's 38 comments or something on the notification, and some people were for it, some people were against getting rid of it. Others, having suggestions on what to do with it, from underpass to, but even because the petition is 700 odd signatures. They were mostly collected from the Bethlehem shopping centre. There's an online one. Unfortunately, I haven't got the results of that. I'm trying to get hold of the lady, but she's had an accident, and yeah, unfortunately, I can't present the results of that. But how do I describe it? One of the comments was the roundabout's now got a garden in the middle of it, and people can't see through their garden. That garden is actually obscuring your vision when you're driving a car to see right down to where that pedestrian crossing is. Another suggestion, there's a few suggestions, because even though the petition is about removal, I think it is an opportunity of improving, and that improvements, clean the roundabout up so you can see, put signage, warning signs of the pedestrian crossing, because and the traffic lights themselves have only a red and a green. There's no amber, so there's no actual warning that you're going to be having to stop soon. And so I changed the tower, the light tower, put an amber one as well, just like ordinary traffic lights. And they put a warning time. For night, install floodlights from my head coming down. So when the pedestrian comes up, pushes the button, a light will come on, and it'll light up the pedestrian crossing. So at night time, it's going to be right. Something simple like that. It's not too much to ask. It's not huge, because I understand that given a couple of years, the new bypass and stuff will be in. The crossing won't be so busy. But in the interim, something's got to be done. It just can't stay as it is. Just can't have any more tragedies there. It's that simple.
Okay, look, thank you very much. So we've got your petition, but listening to you, because I was going to ask you that question, because the petition is to remove the pedestrian crossing. And I gather that the idea would be to have, the ultimate would be either an underpass or an overpass rather than a pedestrian crossing.
Yeah, that would be perfect.
But in the meantime, do something about making the pedestrian crossing much safer. So what we'll do is, you've got those comments there from those people. Do you want to table those, or do you want to give us those? That would be helpful. Thank you.
I'll just keep them here so I can read them.
No, that will be helpful. What we'll do is we'll get the staff now to do a report for us, so they'll have a look at it. We'll talk to them about your suggestions, and then we'll come back to you with that report and have another conversation with you about what we can and can't do. And see if that satisfies you.
Well, any change for the better, there's got to be a change,
Well, we certainly want to make sure that we keep everyone safe. So, really appreciate you coming in, and the time and energy that you've put into gathering the petition. Appreciate that too. And you've obviously been out and talked to the members of the people, the community.
Well, from that area, And that's, to me, that's crucial, is to have what their input is. And if the council wants to take time to look, it's on Bethlehem Community Post. Community page, sorry.
Okay.
It's all through for
for more comments.
And then you can have a read of what actual people had to say, and to me that's good representation. Of
that's right.
The locals.
Okay, we'll do that. Bill and Shad, do you have any questions? No, I think you've been very clear, Mark. Thank you very much. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you very much for your time.
Cheers. Thank you. So would someone like to move that we accept the petition and ask the staff to provide a report? Thank you. Moved by Shad, seconded by Bill. Don't need any more in it than that, do we? No. That's it. Yeah, of course. Okay. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried. In accepting the petition, we're also accepting the comments that he's passed on to us from members of the public. All right, so that brings us to the end of the open section of the meeting. So would someone like to move that we go into public excluded for the reasons outlined in the agenda? Shad and seconded by Bill. All those in favour say aye. Against, carried.